A lot of people have kind of wanted to know what my opinion was on the competition committee, the announcements, and the 25. And, you know, there's been a lot of drama lately on it. And I've been laying low. And this is because I've been a large fly on the wall presence for a lot of these conversations. And even within the inner sanctum, of, you know, the decision making, what's going behind the scenes, I knew a lot more on what was going on than everybody else. And I felt that me talking about it or releasing a video would either cause one or two things. Either people would speculate based on what I'm saying, like, okay, he said this, so that means this is happening. And people would try to read between the lines on what I say and what I don't say to try to interpret and gain information from me. And I figure since I have so much more private information than everybody else, it really doesn't feel right for me to go public with information that should be done separately in an announcement based on the people in the back, the kind of behind the scenes. I'd rather have them release information and then me respond to it publicly once all the information's there. It doesn't feel right for me to release information that's private. I don't know if that information should be shared. And so just that's kind of the reason why I've been kind of not saying anything. Also, I've been in Korea for my brother's wedding. And just to be clear, these are just my opinions. I'm not representing the five. I'm not representing Melee and On Me on this video. This is just me. So just a little bit of background information. I'm going to talk about where a lot of things went wrong, and I'm going to do the best of my ability to kind of recap information here. So as you guys know, the 25 were going to be selected by the 5. They went and searched. They got recommendations, and I think they had a list of like 70 people, give or take, that were recommended to them. 2 of which were women. In fact, early on, I did suggest, hey, like, you know, the women are vying for a representative. You know, of course, we want the person to be qualified, but I think Emily Ways might be a good one. So one of the 5 went to talk to her and say, like, hey, like, we want to include you. And she said something along the line, and then the guy came back to us and said she was not interested. And so it's like, okay, like, and that was what was communicated to us from the get-go. Now, unfortunately, there was a contingency in Emily Waves' I don't want to be on it. And the fact that she said, I'll be on it if there's no other woman, wasn't really communicated then and there. It was something that slipped through the cracks. So right then and there, that's where a lot of confusion came in behind the scenes, because the rest of the 5, I believe, did not know that, and so they just kind of assumed, like, well, if there is a woman that's, you know, that fits our criterion, then of course we're going to add them. You know, Emily was one of them, and another woman, I don't remember offhand who it was. I'm speculating it was Milk Tea. I don't remember off the top of my head. I guess I'm not sure if it's Milk Tea or not, so I don't really want to say that. So it turns out no women were voted in, and because Emily Waves presumably dropped, there were no women on the competition committee. Tafo raid. So the 25 get announced, and there's a lot of confusion on the announcement. And I think it's fair and reasonable to be confused, because everybody had their own idea of what the scope of the competition committee was, what the 25 actually do. I don't think many people were clear. For me in the back end, I kind of knew it was just for rule sets, like box controllers, do we allow memory cards, UCF? But that's because I've been kind of loosely in communication in the back. So I kind of have this biased perspective here, because I knew what the scope was. Presumably the CFC wasn't going to get touched. It was clear to me, but that's because I had more information. I didn't really anticipate it, and I don't think other people anticipated that it would be unclear and ambiguous. So understandably, because so many people were confused, it was just poorly communicated when the 25 got released. So everybody thought, well, hey, the competition committee is going to be progressive moving forward. They're going to decide rules and behavior conduct. when if we're going to assume best intentions here, I don't think Sheridan or the Crimson Blur or anybody intended it for it to be like that. In fact, the CFC, I believe, was written by Twitch lawyers to begin with, and I don't think they had the intention of modifying it. So it was a goof on their end. They include the CFC in it, so it's very easy to put 2 and 2 together. And because you have influencers like D1 and Gimmer, it just makes sense to assume that the code of conduct and all that stuff is fair game for the competition committee to come out with. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 was that they didn't respond quick enough, in my opinion, to say, hey, this is not a part of it. And because of the radio silence, you allow people to draw conclusions, to get rightfully angry because, hey, if we're assuming that the competition committee is doing code of conduct stuff, then why the hell are there no women on this competition committee? Very reasonable response, in my opinion, because if you're making that assumption, then of course, why the hell aren't there no women on this? Now, from the get-go, if it was very clear that you're only deciding on rule sets, then it makes sense. You want people who, if you're just deciding on rule sets, it's a very gender-neutral topic. You're not going to, whether or not a woman or a woman or a man get wobbled, it doesn't matter. It's non-discriminatory based on gender, so it kind of makes sense that, like, hey, like, it'd be nice to have a woman on the competition committee if it's possible, if it was just for rule sets, but not totally necessary, in my opinion. Some people may disagree with me. Some people might stop this video and call me a sexist, but, you know, honestly speaking, you know, if it included code of conduct, then, and we had 25 people, honestly speaking, I would have at least put 6 women on it. Granted, it's like 4 or 5% of the Smash community is represented by women, and 6 would be 24% women. In fact, most of the code of conduct issues affect women more than guys, in my opinion, so it makes sense to bring in a lot more. So there's that issue that came up. And right then and there, because of how much things were miscommunicated, you kind of draw a line in the sand by saying, like, no additional woman will be added after the first Melee on Me clarification statement said that we're not going to add anybody, even though Armada and other people offered to step down. It kind of puts this, well, like, we don't care about women notion out there, which I think was another mistake. And I could see it from the perspective of, and a lot of it seems like the Melee and Omni or the 5 are backtracking. They're just trying to exclude women because they're sexist. They don't actually care about women. But I want to take a step back here and say, like, really? Because as far as I know, all the people on the committee have been allies to women. You know, they've advocated for women. Like, Sheridan is one of the biggest advocates. Like, to kind of put them on the spot like that and say they don't care about women, that they're sexist, that they're not progressive, it kind of seems a little bit weird to me, although that individual action may indicate so. Like, collectively speaking, they have nearly a decade of you know, they have a decade of evidence to indicate that it's kind of like, it's hard to put Sheridan and call him a sexist, like, just realistically speaking, with his track record, so that doesn't make any sense. Now, there are some things that kind of went wrong, and I can kind of see where initially it's kind of difficult to put Emily back on, and I'll explain why. I like to give this analogy. Let's say I had something, like, really important to me, and I ask, let's say I ask you, random YouTube, Twitch audience member, hey, can you help me out here? I really value your opinion. Will you help? And you tell me, hey, I don't want to be on it unless, like, I'm the only one. To me, like, that tells me in that, like, you're not going to put in the full effort. And regardless of whether Emily's a guy or a girl, like, if you kind of give that response to me and say, like, only put me on if nobody else accepts, really tells me that your heart's not really in it. But to be, and so from the 5, I can kind of see from the perspective, well, if this is her response to like initially saying like to the initial offer, to me it tells me honestly like you're not going to do like the best job possible. Now from Emily's perspective, to defend her, because I don't want to pigeonhole anybody, from Emily's perspective, I imagine what was going on in the back of her mind when she initially got asked was, hey, it's additional work on my plate, and there are probably a bunch of other women that are qualified to handle this, that I'm not needed. Which, you know, in her perspective, is she really believes that there are a litany of women who could help decide rule set related stuff. Good assumption, fairly reasonable, so I could see where Emily is coming from. And then Emily coming back later and saying, wait a minute, there's no woman, I want to be on this. She's very passionate, you know, she's fighting for the women in the community, so I understand where she could kind of suddenly go from being like a 5 out of 6 out of 10, 5 or 6 out of 10 in terms of interest, to a 10 out of 10 makes sense. But I also want to point out from the 5's perspective that if your initial answer is, oh, only put me on if no one else is there, it gives you a little bit of hesitancy on whether or not to put, you know, Emily on. Now, fortunately, you know, Axe decided to step down. Sheridan talked to Scar, talked to Emily. So the decision being made is that Axe is stepping down and Emily is being moved on. Some other caveats, you know, I want to put in here. You know, if it is a larger community and code of conduct is being put in, then you can easily advocate for a bunch of women to be on it. You could put Lil on it. You could put Milk Tea on it. You could put a few of the TOs on it. The one thing that kind of was very troubling for me, and I didn't know how to articulate this on social media because I feel like I've gotten a lot of backlash, is that if you put a woman, so there's the big discussion point on Reddit was like, well, we shouldn't just put a token woman on the team just because they're a woman if they're not qualified. You know, I'll agree with that at face value, but it implies that no women are qualified, and so there's a faulty underlying premise there that when people say that there are no women qualified, so therefore no one should be included, which I think, you know, is wrong. You know, as far as deciding rule sets go, even like if you put D1 and Gimmer on it, no offense to them, but then I think Emily Waves also should have a fair shot, for example. Or the name eludes me. There's another woman TO there's a couple of women TO that I respect that could have fit the role as much as D1 and Gimmer have, just to be honestly speaking. So there's that. However, I did see some recommendations that really scratched my head, at, and I think that the other part of it is that if you put a token woman, or if you put a woman that frankly is not quote unquote qualified, whatever that means, or like the perception is they're very underqualified, it actually hurts everybody at the end of the day, because the focus becomes, how the hell did this person get on? That person gets belittled. That person doesn't do a good, if that woman doesn't do a good job, then she becomes a shining example of positive sexism, LOL. See, there's no actual sexism in the Smash community, and you get a lot of backlash, and it reflects poorly. So you want to have a woman that will do a good job, and if you just slap somebody in there just for the sake of being a woman, it actually hurts everybody. It hurts the community, and perpetuates sexism. People will use that woman as an example for negativity, and everybody just takes 2 steps back. If I'm just being honest here, so that's one thing you do have to be careful of too. And some, like, no offense, you know, like HT, a really great player, and people were nominating her to be on the competition committee. Frankly, don't see it. If you put HT on the committee, it would have created a huge backlash. And so that's just one thing you do have to be careful of. It's not, I don't know how to say this without like sounding like a jerk. But, you know, all in all, I just want to just end it with saying there are women that are qualified. So there. So it's just overall like a very messy experience. Moving ahead, I'm glad Emily's on. She's very passionate, very gung-ho. Part of the reason why I actually didn't want to be a part of the 25 is because we scrutinized and tore apart the TOs, Blur, Genesis, Big House, these people who have been serving the community for years, and then one decision turns this much backlash. Now, the 25, for every decision being made, is going to be transparent. You're going to be able to see who voted for what. And I feel because when you have an amendment, the reason why things are amendment is because they tend to be 50-50. Like, there's going to be people on both sides of the coin, whether it's UCF, Arduinos, controller mods, whatever issues that come up in the form of an amendment. The reason why it's an amendment is because we kind of have some disagreements within the community, and no matter what, you can't win. It's extra stress. No matter what decision you believe is correct, there's going to be people on the other side that are going to tweet at you. There are going to be people that question your credibilities. There's going to be people that just yell at you and harass you, and frankly, it's not very fun. And I just thought to myself, when I thought about signing for the 25, I actually did think about it quite a bit before ultimately deciding to go on, is that, hey, I love creating content. I love talking about stats. I love coaching. I like commentating, and I like having fun. With the 25, it's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of unneeded stress. But I guess this is what it means to be a leader, right? It means to have to do things you don't necessarily like to do. It means having to deal with politics. It means having to put your foot on the ground for what's right, and dealing with the potential backlash. But it's not going to be fun, and I imagine that very quickly the rest of the 25 are going to realize it's not as fun or glamorous to be on the competition committee. Right now, it seems like it's a badge of honor. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm a congressman, I'm the 25, I have sway. But then you realize that the amount of work it takes and the amount of backlash you get, it's not going to be that fun. I imagine people are going to be hypercritical of Emily when she gets on this. They're going to go like, oh, she's a woman. Oh, she doesn't even play the game at a high level. I can already foresee like the criticism that most people are going to get on the decisions that are made, and people are just going to be attacked. So, and then a couple of other notes in regards to the scope of the competition committee. Like, frankly, code of conduct, yes, very needed in our community. There are some things that I would never want to do personally, and if, honestly speaking, to add to this, if I was a part of the 25 and they made me a juror and an executioner in the sense of player conflict between player A and player B within the community, what kind of fine do we give? If I had to make those kind of decisions, I would actually step down, because I don't feel comfortable being a jury, judge, or executioner in these regards. I can make recommendations, and I think a lot of people came out with this idea of like, yes, like we're going to come up with a code of conduct that not only lays guidelines, but somehow we'll figure out how to lay punishments on people. That if player A touches player B inappropriately, that's a 6-month fine. If player C assaults player D, that's a 2-year fine. And I really can't see a competition committee, frankly, drawing those lines or even deciding on it. It just doesn't really feel right to kind of create this like Leviticus like rule book saying like, thou shall not do this, or you are unclean for 6 months, or what. I don't know. Poor example, but you get my point. And so those are just kind of my general thoughts. I mean, it's a little bit of a ramble, but these are my thoughts. This is Tafo Talks, and I hope people kind of get away with this. Keep in mind, these are my thoughts. These aren't Millionomities, and these aren't the fives. These aren't the competition committees. I'm just speaking on behalf of myself.